My name is Rabbi Efrat Zarin Zohar. I'm the executive director of SAGE, and I'm excited to be moderating a virtual conversation with Rebecca Shore, co-director, co-producer, and writer, Oren Rosenfeld, co-director, co-producer, and one of the directors of photography, and Raphael Shore, executive producer of the movie Converts, The Journey of Becoming Jewish, which is premiering at this year's festival. Thank you all so much for joining us. I really enjoyed the movie a lot, very interesting. And as a Reform rabbi, of course, I've worked with people who are on that journey of becoming Jewish. And each one of those journeys is so fascinating, so unique, so interesting, and so worth nurturing. So I'm so glad you made the movie. I wanted to ask maybe first to start with Rebecca and then Oren and then Raphael. Tell us about how you chose the subject of people seeking to convert to Judaism and why you thought this was a story that was important to tell.
Hi, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here and an honor. How did we decide to make this film? Well, we had met over the years. We live in the old city of Jerusalem and we have many guests over. And over the years, we've met a number of people in the process of conversion. And we were always fascinated with their stories. Each one is, like, as you said, so unique and so just compelling. And, you know, in this day and age when people are seen to be opting out of Judaism, we found it a really fascinating thing to explore. Why would someone want to become Jewish when so many people seem to not be particularly interested in being Jewish? And we thought it would be a great, interesting human interest story to follow, and that it would be also a great way to look and talk and kind of introduce some basic ideas in Judaism as well, because their journey is going through a lot of the basic building blocks of what it means to be Jewish. So we thought it'd be a very interesting and engaging way to talk about interesting Jewish things besides their compelling stories.
Wonderful, thanks. And Oren?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very interesting subject to me. I mean, living in Israel, you meet a lot of people that have converted to Judaism, and each one comes with an amazing story. And over the years, you know, you learned that each one of their stories is actually a movie on its own. So, having said that, you know, we had to go out and find the right characters for our movie, and that was a mission on its own. I mean, you could choose from, you know, the more famous ones out there, and there's quite a few recently, from porn stars to wives of famous presidents and etc. But we chose to go for the less celebrity and the less known, to really get the feeling of why would anybody want to join you know, the Jewish nation, especially in a time like this, like Rebecca mentioned, that it's not very, you know, popular.
And Raphael, how about you?
Well, just to add, I mean, I obviously concur with everything that they've said, but 20 years ago, I went to Poland, and I went to the only functioning synagogue there with the rabbi who appears in the film, and you know, he couldn't get a minyan. And 15 years later, there's 500 people at that synagogue in Poland for Purim. And a large reason for it is because of converts. There's a huge movement of converts. It's not just in Poland, it's global. I do a lot of traveling, and everywhere I go, every Jewish organization is involved with converts. And it's an amazing phenomenon that's really not well known in the Jewish world, that the fact that there are literally thousands of people every year coming to Judaism who don't have to. And that's just an incredibly interesting, unknown story.
Yes, definitely. So you alluded to finding these particular individuals to profile. So tell us that story, because that must have been pretty exciting to find. You know, how do you just go find people who happen to be in a converting process? You just randomly call rabbis, hey,
Yeah,
let me know.
That was
Really?
No,
that was just a guess. Go on, tell us more.
Well, first of all, Oren is. I've made a number of films with Oren, been honored to be partnering with him, and he has an amazing knack for finding awesome characters. So he was tremendously helpful. But it was a little bit of a saga, actually, finding characters, because many people were a bit concerned about being filmed. They were worried it would get in the way of their process. They were worried that maybe the rabbinical supervision might look negatively on it. So there was a lot of beginnings and false starts and initial conversations and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think for the 3 that were in, I think we must have seriously looked at another half a dozen, at least, of people who we really had in-depth conversation with, follow-up conversation, tried to get it going, and it didn't happen. So it was, it's always amazing when you make a film because it always ends up perfect. You always seem to find the perfect people, but when you're in the process, it can be a little difficult, I'd say. But Oren probably has more to say.
Yeah, tell us more, Oren.
Yeah, so like Rebecca said, we've done quite a few movies together, and what makes a documentary at the end of the day are the characters. And it's very hard, like what was mentioned here, to nail it down, to find the right one that's willing to risk it being exposed throughout such a very delicate and very personal process like conversion. And so the minute somebody that we really liked said yes, we jumped in a plane and went straight over, not to give them the chance to back out. Some did, but we were very fortunate with the characters that we found, and also their locations made a big difference, because we wanted somebody in North America, and we wanted somebody in Europe, and somebody maybe from South America. But so eventually we got our characters, but the process was very it wasn't easy. People backed out, and
it was not easy. It was not easy.
How
we
long
had
does-
we had a number of rabbis who wanted to help us too. We were given help, and there were people suggesting, but there's that combination of, finding the right person and getting them to agree and getting access. Those are always complicated in any film you make, but I think this film, because of the subject, was even more delicate, like Oren mentioned.
Yeah.
Wow.
And many we wanted people more in the start of their conversion process rather than okay, and most rabbis told us, well, we have somebody perfect for you, she just finished her conversion, and I can't tell you how many numerous we heard, but eventually we did manage to find people that were in the process.
And what's the goal? I mean, yes, Raphael, you mentioned people don't really know about this phenomenon of people converting, and in so many different places in the world, what's going on. Are there any other goals that you were hoping to accomplish with this? And I know that there's Open Door Media as a whole has certain kinds of visions and goals, motivations for the Jewish world and the world altogether. So maybe you can explore that a little bit for us.
Yeah, well, I think, as filmmakers, there's not a strong agenda in making the film. If we had a strong agenda, we would have picked people who already converted, who we knew what was going to happen. But by definition, by finding people who were in the process and near the beginning of the process, as Oren said, we didn't know what we're going to find. So really, our goal was just to explore the personal journey of several individuals who want to become Jewish, because we knew that is fascinating in and of itself. And everybody who is on that journey is fascinating. So we knew no matter who we follow, it's going to be interesting. Judaism, unlike many other religions, is not easy to convert into. And
that was very apparent in the movie. and I think, one of the things that we forget, those born into it, is the amount of lingo, right, that you just naturally kind of have, that you have to definitely determine and learn and wrestle with when you're coming into this thing called Judaism, and you realize oh yeah, all of this is lingo to somebody else. So agreed.
To learn how to swim in that sea. I think for me, one of the things I love about making long form documentary, there's a few things. First of all, that you have characters that kind of get under people's skin, and they live with you afterwards. And the things they grapple with and their challenges become part of you. At least that's my experience when I watch a good documentary. But more importantly, I think this, for us, this is an exploration of, for me, it was an exploration of identity. It's about being Jewish, but it's really an exploration of identity and the questions that it raises for people watching about their own identity, what they're willing to give up or sacrifice or do for that identity, and how much it means to them, and those kind of deep choices, I think is super compelling. And that was my, that's what really makes me excited about making this film and all films, but this film in particular. I'm really looking forward to seeing the kind of dialogue and engagement around the film once people have watched it.
Mhm.
Yeah, and just to touch on that also is that, you mentioned Open Door Media, the organization that I founded, and, we're making a lot of films, feature length as well as short. But I think the common denominator that this film also touches on is why be Jewish? That's really the core question of this film, is exploring why be Jewish? Why are these people who are not Jewish choosing to be Jewish? And it's a question that all Jewish people should be asking themselves and grappling with that question. So this film helps them grapple.
That's just to add, my favorite line in the film, one of my favorite lines is Rabbi Grover saying that if he had his druthers, he would send his entire congregation into a conversion course.
Yes.
I loved, first of all, he was so awesome. I loved him in general. He was so well spoken, but that was to me one of the winning lines of the film. And it really, we do engage with our Jewish identity at a young age. And a lot of times people don't really have a very developed and a mature relationship with it. And there's something amazing about watching people who are adults and or beyond, even, Diana is in her 30s. People who are mature and thinking and have a lot to lose, being willing to make these kind of sacrifices and choose to be Jewish. And that's an amazing thing. And it should be people. I hope it gets people to ask questions about their own, about where they stand on that.
Especially what you said, like, what am I willing to do? What am I willing to give up for this aspect of identity that's so clearly important to me? Like Diana with her daughter was so clear. She was so torn. I have a responsibility to take care of my daughter, but I also really, really want to be here in Israel so I can complete this process. And then it became critical. And I gather there must have been a lot of backstory going on there that, for the daughter's privacy was probably, truncated or cut out. But Oren, what about you? How has this movie affected you in watching it and meeting these people in maybe, as an Israeli, also in your Jewish identity is sort of intertwined with that nationalism of being an Israeli. And that's always so interesting to take those two apart and take a look at one and the other.
Well, I found it very interesting, especially in Poland and then in Spain. People after the Holocaust in Poland, everybody you speak to in Poland, and I've been there many times before, we filmed there. The minute they hear you're from Israel, they say, I have, my grandfather was Jewish or my great grandmother was Jewish. Everybody you speak to suddenly has some Jewish blood in them. And I think that is the result of the Holocaust, of this big trauma that Poland's been through. I mean, the most Jews in Europe were in Poland, and now there's, you can count them on your finger. So in Poland, it was something that we, and I myself as well, encountered a lot. But then from Diana's story, how she remembers her grandmother lighting candles, but she doesn't know why. So this is from a Holocaust that took place hundreds of years before the Inquisition, the Spanish Inquisition. So these two major traumas that Jews went through, not Israelis, in history, are still lingering and still in the air and still causing people to look for their identity. And I have to say that many of them, once they start learning and converting, see Israel is a place that they want to visit, and some actually want to come and move here. So there is a connection, but there isn't. So it's a very nice dance between the two. At least, I mean, that's what I think I experienced from this.
Nice. And so give us an update on our protagonists. Like I became so curious, like, oh, whenever the movie wrapped, I'm sure there's all kinds of new things that have happened since then in their lives. And I always wonder, did Adam finally talk to his father? Oi, you know?
Yeah, Oren's very up to date with everybody. He's much more a social media guy than I am. So he's more up to date on where people are at. So
All
Well,
right, Oren, tell us, give us the update.
So the update is that I'll start with Bianca. So we left, and by the way, I mean, it's always difficult to know when to stop a documentary because you could go on forever. But we decided to stop it at where it was, we got the point, and we understood that they went through this process, and we left it to it. So Bianca left Poland and left her conversion process and went to study in Holland, where she met an Israeli. And they fell in love. And now she's back to converting again in Holland. And if it wasn't for COVID, she'd already be here in Israel visiting. And so that's Bianca. So she's been through quite a bit of a roller coaster and still is. But her story is very interesting. She came to it from exploring different religions and found herself in Judaism, but she's continuing. Daniil has come on a trip to Israel, fell in love with a Russian girl from Bat Yam near Tel Aviv. They're engaged. So everything's working out for him. Adam's still in Canada, still learning, still doing his thing.
he was engaging more with the community. He was trying to get more involved, I think, in the Orthodox community, actually, of Toronto, the last time we looked. So, and he was looking to go to law school and wanting to come visit Israel, but COVID has made things complicated.
Right. And Deanna still, we kind of lost touch with her in the past COVID months. But as far as we understand, she's still trying to make it all work out through the bureaucracy and everything she's been through. It's very difficult for her.
And is she living in Israel now or back in Costa Rica?
She's here. Yeah, she's still in it. Yeah.
Israel,
Boy,
yeah. I think that her daughter ended up going back to finish high school in Costa Rica.
That's
She had
what
come back and then she went back again.
That's what
was
it said at the
ongoing.
end of the movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
But and it sounded like that was the right move for her at that time.
Yeah.
And then so tell us any anecdotes that you can share that were part of the filming that you think that the audience would find interesting, or things that you had to cut out that there's always all kinds of things on the cutting room floor, as they used to say,
Always.
where everything was digital. So what's not in? What anecdotes can you share that we didn't get to see that would be fun to know?
Gosh.
Inside scoops, that kind of stuff.
Inside scoops.
Well, until Rebecca thinks, there was one thing that stayed with me, and it was in Poland. I mean, everywhere you go in Poland as a Jew, you feel the Holocaust still lingering in the air. And we went with Bianca and her friend to see where she grew up, and she remembered her grandmother telling her that this is where many Jews lived before the war. And as we're walking up this really spooky staircase, Amit, our sound man, pointed out that there was a swastika graffitied in that hallway, and he was really taken back from it. And then we all saw it as well.
We also had, remember when we went and saw that graffiti on the wall, and then it got, oh, sorry, were you going to tell that one? Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So we were in the same town, Radom. Radom is a town that was not destroyed in the war because it was an industrial center. So it's really eerie. We walked down the streets that at one time it was about 80% Jewish there, or 70% Jewish. And there's still places where you see the places where the mezuzahs went, and all the shops on these main streets used to be Jewishly owned. And we're walking toward where the ghetto was. And I don't know, Oren pointed like, we saw an archway and we went into this archway, and it's in the film where they talk about, we found that writing on the wall. But what's not in the film is that we're busy filming and we're busy looking at the writing. And it was just an unbelievably freaky thing to see like Yiddish Hebrew on the wall there. And then all of a sudden it was kind of like the Dementors, in Harry Potter, it started getting really cold there, and people started coming out of the shops and they started looking at us, and it got really creepy really fast. They wanted to know why we were there, and Bianca had to actually intervene and start talking to them in Polish and explaining that we're just filming, we're not. Basically all of Radom knew we were there. It was like you could feel it. We were there, right? I felt it. It was just like the whole city knew that there was a Jewish film crew filming in Radom.
Yeah, there's an interesting thing there in Poland in particular, and in Radom, this specific place, is that they're all very afraid, the locals, that, oh, here's these Israelis, there's Jews, they're coming to claim back their property.
Yeah, their money.
And that was that's a big issue there still today. And I think that's why we got these looks, and that's why we were unwelcomed. We felt unwelcomed. It was very eerie. But seeing Hebrew on the wall, made us get closer and more interested. So we kind of ignored the drunk people with their glass bottles behind us, gathering closer and closer.
Yeah.
It could have easily, we could have easily been in a dangerous situation, but Bianca was very smart.
She was very good. It happened to be one of the guys she went to high school with. So she was just started schmoozing with him, and then it was okay. We also met her teacher. Her teacher didn't make it in this. She was really a trip, and there was a guy in her high school, which he had quite an effect. We wanted to meet him. It didn't work out, but I think he had an impact on her wanting to look into Judaism, because he was someone who had documented the entire Jewish history of Radom. Remember, we never got to meet him. Like, it didn't work out. It became torrential rain. We went to her. Poland was really something.
It was. She took us to see the headquarters of the SS.
The Gestapo, yeah.
The Gestapo, but it turns out that the hotel we
in Warsaw.
In Warsaw was the HQ of the Gestapo of all of Poland, and we happened to stay there while filming.
That was really weird.
Very creepy.
That was really kind of creepy. That was definitely creepy. Yeah, it was definitely an experience. Definitely filming in Toronto wasn't anything.
No.
Although
Poland,
we did go. What?
I was going to say, having gone to Poland 4 times on the March of the Living, there's something if you're an energy sensitive person, you just feel there's just souls that are there. There's stuff there. There's so
much stuff there. We went to the cemetery in Warsaw, and I was walking around and I could sense something there. And it turned out I was standing right by the mass grave where about 75,000 Jews from the Warsaw Ghetto had been dumped. And then someone proceeded to tell us that, just like last year, the earth had been settling and the bones had started coming through the earth, and they had to like recover it. I was just like, and I could feel it, we could feel it. Oren, we drove back, remember, from Radom, and it was just horrible weather. It was just it was quite oppressive. I found the whole thing. I mean, it was very fascinating being there, going to Bianca's parents' house. I think this wasn't March of the Living. This was like going really into sort of real life in Poland and real like how the proletariat lives there. And, it's just, coming out of the Iron Curtain, it's a depressing place. It's like, it's Eastern Europe. It was Eastern Europe, and her parents' house, like, these are people, her father's very well educated. He was a lovely man, but like, it's just, life isn't easy there.
No, and you could kind of tell, like looking, even like if you look carefully in the home, like, things needed fixing, and you could see that, like, they would have if they probably either cared or had the means to do it.
They're very poor. They're
very poor. I think they care. They just don't have any money.
Yeah. And I was just very struck by that dinner. That scene was like, oh my gosh, you just saw the faces and everybody, the atmosphere closing in until everybody was, the father looked miserable, the mother looked miserable, the brother looked miserable, and only Bianca's like, I'm having a great time telling you my life, my story.
She hadn't really told we had this with both characters, her and Adam. They hadn't really come clean with their parents until they did it on camera, actually, which was
Yeah,
pretty
we helped them
amazing.
come out of the closet, and
Closet, yeah.
the
Their
cameras, the crew gave them the confidence, I believe, to confront their parents on this very touchy subject, especially
Yeah.
Adam. That moment there in the park was, we couldn't make that up even if we wanted to. I mean, it was really incredible. And his mother was stayed very composed and very stood her ground, and wanted to really understand, are you really going to leave Jesus? She couldn't comprehend it. But she loves her son so much that she accepted it, at least in front of us.
No, I
Yeah.
think that, no, I think they have a good relationship. And I think that for me as a parent, I think that was very, very touching to see that at the end of the day, it's a love for a child it's irrespective of anything else, that love endures. And I think that's a beautiful, also one of my favorite moments of the film, that kind of message of like, okay, you don't agree on things, but you can still love each other. And that's really, really important, whatever process anybody's going through.
We don't know if he ever spoke to his father, do we?
No, he did speak to his dad. He went to a wedding. By the way, those little scenes at the end that were, filmed, that was filmed 2 years later. The little ones at the credits. And we didn't really have time in the film. And again, where do you end a film? We weren't going to start reopening everything, but he had gone to a family wedding, and he had been kind of re-entering into the family and holding his ground. Although they're always, we cut out, again, it's not in there, it got cut, but like he was saying how they'd be very happy, because Daniil was saying, I want to marry somebody Jewish. What's the point of converting? I'm going to marry someone who's not Jewish. And then we cut this out. It was in, but it got cut out. And Adam says, my parents, my family would be thrilled if that happens. They haven't given up on him, that he should, he should come back to the fold. But that got left on the cutting room floor.
Yeah, it struck me that it was so interesting that his father had risked it all for his religious dream of opening that church that ultimately failed and then sort of almost bankrupted the family. And then here was Adam, a generation later, in a way, risking it all in a different kind of way to do what he felt was right religiously. And it just, each person in their own way doing this path of, I'm going to do what I feel is right for my religious beliefs. And, at least they're sharing that, even if they're on different kinds of paths. Such fascinating dynamics. Always, when you're working with people and their families, so much going on. It's really,
so many layers, many layers, and one of the other things that struck me when we were filming Adam, he was living in one of these projects in Toronto. And so it's this very generic building, the building was like the ultimate generic, and his apartment was very generic. And I almost felt like it was almost like he was in a witness protection program when I walked in there. There was no clues about anything having to do with his personal life. You remember that, Oren? There wasn't a photograph, and there was no frame photographs. There was nothing. It was almost like he was really just trading in the life that he'd left for, he wanted out and he wanted different, and he wanted his Judaism. And he just kind of was like, he didn't have any ties to what was going on in the past. He had to make a break. That's how I felt. We caught him at the point where he was really making a break for something, for a different life. And he's making that life for himself. And so it was fascinating. Really.
Yeah, for some of them, it was like a socioeconomic jump. At the same time, we're moving a little bit of moving communities a bit, as well as, as well as personal paths. And there's so many different pieces that go along with this. So just, I don't know, anything you want to say about a next project, or any final words to wrap up this one, that you want to conclude with?
Well, we are also, go ahead, Oren, you say first.
Oh, sorry. I wanted to speak about the whole issue of the anusim, the conversos in the world at the moment. That
you mean the people who had been forced to convert under the Inquisition in the Spanish territory?
And then in Portugal and in Spain, and then spread out around the world. One of them was Christopher Columbus, for instance. But this is an ongoing thing. There are millions of people that in the world, in South America and Central America and in all these areas, that still very much believe or feel, they're Jewish. There's a potential for millions of them to convert. They just feel it, but don't know what they're feeling. And for me, that was something that was really interesting in this movie. And if I want to do another movie about this, that would be where I would take it, to explore that a bit more, because in Spain and all these places, it's as if they just left. And like in Poland, but hundreds of years before. So that's something I'm taking with me from this movie, is perhaps
Great.
that's something to explore in the future.
Mhm.
And one of our previous films that we worked on together was Hummus the Movie, which was screened in the Miami Jewish Film Festival, as well as I think well over 100 film festivals around the world. Hummus the Movie, and it was very light, enjoyable film about a Christian, Jew, and Arab who all own hummus restaurants. So Oren's been busy at work on Holy Vegans, exploring
That's great.
a film called Holy Vegans, because the veganism was really started, if I'm not mistaken, in Israel. And there's so many great characters. So that's one project that is brewing under Oren's leadership. And he's been filming that for a couple of years. As I said before, we co-produced the film about Menachem Begin, the life of the great Israeli prime minister. And we're also just wrapping up a feature film called Exodus 91. It's a docudrama about the airlift of 14,000 Ethiopians in 1991, the Aliyah of the first time in history where Blacks were brought out of Africa for freedom as opposed to slavery. And it's a wonderful, the backstory from the viewpoint of the Israel's ambassador to Ethiopia. So we're wrapping that one up now, and we're hoping it'll be in film festivals in 2022. So that's some of the projects.
No, the other project that Oren and I are currently working on is we've been following Bidi Deutsch, who is the marathon runner. And we've been following her for 2 years now as she's trying to hit the Olympic world standard of running. She's an Orthodox mother of 5 who only started running about 5 years ago. So she's a real sports phenomenon, and she's only about a minute and a half off of the 2:29:30 to qualify for world competition. And she has a fascinating story. So we're still following her. She's trying to meet that goal. I think we're going to be following her to Spain in February. We're hoping to end the movie because we hope she gets her goal.
Yeah, that would be a great uplifting ending. That's incredible. Yeah, I've read about her.
She's had a lot of ups and downs. COVID has put a real, wrench in her plans, and it's not easy being an Olympic level athlete with that many children and all the obligations that go with running in a skirt with your head covered. And it's a fascinating, cool story.
And if she had gotten into the Olympics, she would not have run the race because it was on Shabbat.
Right.
So it's also exploring some deep Jewish
identity,
ideas.
the same idea of your identity, kind of a different angle as converts of what are you willing to give up to, what's more important, it's
Right.
What are you willing to give up for your Jewish values? So it's a really cool subject. So that's the other film that we are in the middle of production on.
Well, we are all looking forward to seeing those. I know that your films always make it into our festival and are great, popular, acclaimed works, and we're thrilled with whatever new ideas you have. We'll be looking forward to them. And thank you so very much again for all that you've done in the Jewish world of film, and also, everything that you've produced that's been of such high quality. So Rebecca Shore, co-director, co-producer, writer; Oren Rosenfeld, co-director, co-producer, one of the directors of photography; and Raphael Shore, the executive producer, movie Converts: The Journey of Becoming Jewish. Thank you so much for joining us. And once again, thank you to all our members, sponsors, community partners, volunteers, and all of you film lovers, as well as the Center for the Advancement of Jewish Education, also known as SAGE, and the Greater Miami Jewish Film Federation for participating in this milestone 25th Miami Jewish Film Festival. And that's a wrap.